Hey guys, I'm keenly aware that I'm standing between you and beer, so I'm going to try to make it worth your while. I'm an industry analyst. I spend a lot of time working with companies on big data projects from the business side, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about where we are on the business side from about 50,000 feet, and a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today has to do with a talk that I gave, a TED Talk I gave about almost a little over a month ago now, that's still up on the site if you'd like to see it, and that was also about data, what we're doing with data. And it's kind of a meditation on the fact that big data requires both art and science. And we've heard quite a bit about science today, a little bit about art, but I want to talk about why this is particularly important. And the reason that it's particularly important is that a lot of the big data that my clients deal with and I deal with through research is unstructured. And guess who makes unstructured data? We do. Human beings. It's human expression. And so I would like to kind of go through about 7 different things that I've been thinking about over the course of the year that I think will be important to have in the back of your mind as you're doing the work that you do. No matter who your clients are, no matter who your target audience is, no matter what you're doing, whether you're an engineer, data scientist, an analyst, or even in business development. So the first thing is that when you think about the way science works, the scientific method, it's based on a kind of universe that's a little bit more knowable than what we see in the world of big data. And I'm specifically talking about the variety piece of the 3 V's, right? Volume, velocity. I'm talking about variety. I'm talking about the heterogeneity of this data. So when you imagine all the different things that there are in unstructured data, it creates some real pressures on scientific method. Also, when you consider the velocity, you can't step in the same internet twice. And if you think this is a problem now, as Internet of Things continues to gain steam and we start moving from a Fitbit-enabled world and GPS-enabled world in terms of other devices that are sensing behavior, sensing action and activity, and then reporting on that, it's going to get even more complex. And so when you think about some of the challenges that we're seeing on the business side and organizational side, whether they're data scientists at a university who are trying to figure out how to help people quit smoking, or they're people at a big box retailer trying to understand customer behavior, the ability to repeat a scientific experiment with the same data more than once is really, really tough. It's very problematic. And so we're seeing scientists and we're also seeing business people really struggle with methodology. So the second thing is, as a result, we need a lot more rigor and a lot more transparency. If any of you work, do any of you work in natural language processing? Okay, so we know that it's not a perfect science, right? We like we're all, realistic about this, right? And so we know that natural language can be really difficult. And even with machine learning and even with context, it's still kind of a tough sell. I heard a client was telling me that they had been in a meeting with their CEO of a very huge technology company, and they had put a bunch of slides up, and this was, they're giving a presentation, and they said, okay, so here's what we have with our social data, because of course, a lot of social is unstructured and is of course human language, and said, we've got about a 65-70% confidence level in this data, and the CEO said, well, if that's what your confidence level is, why are you even showing me this? So this is what we struggle with, and even as we kind of create smarter algorithms to detect more human sentiment, more human feeling, understand languages, understand content, human language changes. And so this is going to continue to be a challenge for us, and we're both going to have to get better at the technology, and of course the technology gets better all the time because everybody in this room is super smart, but also we have to get better at living in a world that is a little less knowable than the world we used to live in. Rule number 3, we need linguists, we need to be able to pronounce linguists, critics, philosophers. We need people in the humanities. I know it's shocking, but why? The reason is, tell me if you will, what this means. Back to language. It's a sign. It's telling you something. What's it telling you? It's kind of polite because it says please and thank you, so maybe we can infer politeness. Maybe it's funny, maybe it's not, depends on your sense of humor. Again, that's context, right? And maybe it's art. Maybe it's meant to make us think something or do something. Maybe it's part of an installation. I don't know. I got it on Flickr. Then there's the question of not forgetting the obvious, because even in the smartest tools that deeply understand language, we can screw up. And I bet you probably can't read the subhead here, but this is a very alarmist article in Foreign Policy magazine from about a week or so ago, and it's like, why did big data, why did you miss the early signs of Ebola? And it's a very kind of alarmist article, as many of the Ebola articles are. And the answer is, very sad to any of you who are NLP experts in the room, the language detection that they used didn't speak French. And if you think about the countries in which Ebola is predominant, they're predominantly French-speaking countries. So if people are talking about it in French and you can't detect it, you've got a problem. These are really obvious issues. I was on the phone this morning pretty early with a client in Germany that is struggling with the very same thing, that their US-based headquarters is focused on tools that are optimized for English, and they don't do business in English. They do business in a dozen at least other languages. And so this kind of stuff, it's not, it's table stakes now. And so that makes things very challenging. Next rule or principle is the visual web is new territory. Anybody working in photo analytics? Please, somebody raise your hand. Just lie. Okay, thank you. Very good, very good. So, anybody in the room know what this means? What is it? Okay, let me lead you through. I know it's late in the day. Umbrellas. Rain? Maybe? Is it raining? No, it's not rain, it's protests. It's in Hong Kong. It's the umbrella revolution. It's activism. It's pro-democracy. So imagine running this through an algorithm to determine what it means, and what do you get out? It's challenging. And so this is some of what we're dealing with now. Now, there are technologies out there. If any of you have heard of Ditto, it's Ditto. Worst, I think they win my award for worst URL ever. Ditto.us.com. Okay, it's a URL joke. I know that's bad. But anyway, so Ditto, if you run something like this through it, you won't necessarily see anything. But if you run a Coke can through, you will see the logo. And we're starting to get to a point where, like, if somebody's smiling, holding a can of Coke, you could maybe infer positive sentiment from that. What if they're smiling, holding a can of Coke in front of this or in front of a fire? Obviously, as the web becomes more visual, as we become more globalized, and we even use things like, not to mention static images, but obviously video, which moves faster, it becomes much more challenging. We can't just rely on metadata. We can't just rely on tagging. So we have to get better at this. The next thing I want to say is that some of the best thinking is actually really, really old. This is Aristotle. 2,300 years ago, Aristotle came up with about what he called 13 logical fallacies. This is stuff that philosophers and logicians and rhetoricians have been working on for 2,000 years. And this is about understanding modes of persuasion, understanding language. And a lot of this stuff, for those of you who are statisticians, will not be unfamiliar. You'll know a lot of this stuff. But there's so many interesting things in here that I think are, let's just say, possible to engineer into technology to help us find crappy arguments, to help us understand appeals to reason, to understand bad thinking, to understand confirmation bias. If you doubt the confirmation bias exists, just watch what happens when news breaks and somebody tweets something early. And if you go ahead and you were to model all of that, you could see that those early people, those early influencers, have now essentially driven the conversation, because people just kind of keep repeating and repeating and repeating. It's human nature. We don't always have time to stop and think. And we don't always have time to think through, does this actually make sense? And this is why stuff like the news story that came out the other day that Dropbox bought Dolores Park. Hello? Did you guys see, you saw the video, right? People were like, oh my God, Dropbox bought Dolores Park, confirmation bias. It happens all the time. So the TED Talk that I gave a few weeks ago was really about how we need to become better critical thinkers and how becoming better critical thinkers will help us become better technologists. Well, it'll help you because I'm not really a technologist. Now, here's a beautiful correlation. I promised you Keanu, and I'm gonna go back on that promise, but I'm gonna give you Miss America instead. So this is a correlation. This is, I think, an 87% correlation between two things. One is the age of Miss America over time, and the other one is murders by steam, hot vapors, and hot objects. Now, it's kind of beautiful, right? I mean, we can take, visualizations are a beautiful thing, and I'm a huge fan because I actually think you take a tremendous amount of complex information, and I saw some really before I came on that were quite beautiful and quite moving in a way because you can sort of see this group of humanity presented in a way that's almost really art, when you think about it. But at the same time, some of these very, very basic things that are thinking that as I said, we're 2,300 years old, they're really holding us up in our ability to deliver smart insights. And so I wanted to give this to you as a gift, and I also wanted to give you this one, which is, this is even better. This is like in the 90s. This is per capita consumption of cheese correlated with the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. So, technology is a beautiful thing, and it's also, it requires, I think, a community, and I hope that all of you today who are here, who are either tweeting or walking around doing what you do, that you think about these things, because I think as we move into more and more of an unstructured and real-time world, we cannot think fast enough, human beings can't, to disintermediate, disambiguate, create Boolean searches for, do all the things that require being done in order to extract insight from data. And so my hope is that you sort of, in your work and in your thinking, that you incorporate some of these thoughts and hopefully that influences your work later on. So the last thing I want to end on is a little bit about ethics, and I don't want to sound like a second grade teacher, but I do want to talk a little bit about a responsibility that I think we have as human beings, both to ourselves and, those of you who have or will have children, those of you who have or, who have families, friends, etc. Because as we continue to use many, many different types of big data sources, we fall into the law of unintended consequences. So, one of the most famous unintended privacy consequences was that Target story of the woman whose father found out that she was pregnant because they had seen her shopping history. And what you may not know is that there was a journalist who, a few weeks later, his wife, after they had been trying to get pregnant, his wife told him that she was pregnant, and they were so excited, but of course, as many couples do, they didn't tell anybody. And 2 days later, what comes in the mail? A baby catalog. And he kind of freaked out, and he wrote an investigative story about it, and he actually went and talked to the company and tried to figure out, is there something like, and this is what happens, I think, when we're talking about trust. Is it something I bought? Is it something I said online? Was there some way in which I betrayed the fact that my wife is pregnant? I haven't even told my family yet. Now, as it happened, he had bought some gifts for his niece and nephew for Christmas, the holiday before, and so he just ended up on a mailing list. It was a completely innocuous reason. But we're in a world now where a journalist, an everyday person, is going to be asking that question. What is it that triggered this behavior from a business that I do business with? What is it that you know about me that I didn't realize that you knew about me? And so I think we need to think about that. The next thing is we need to think about transparency, that if we don't have transparency about our data sources, that, and I'll talk about in the case of Twitter, we see this all the time. In fact, arguments between different listening and analytics platforms. One company that I work with, a big company, big global company, had switched from one listening platform, taking in all the social data, to another. And they like to do things like share voice analysis. They wanted to know, how are we doing in our market compared to our 4 biggest competitors? So they were number 2 for a really long time, and they're happy with that. And they, obviously want to be number 1, but it's pretty good. New CMO, who they're trying to impress, really, really happy. And then they decide, we really need a deeper understanding. We need deeper NLP. We want to more deeply understand what people are saying about our brand. They move to a different tool. Now they're number 4 out of 5. This sucks. And so I go and try to do a little due diligence for them to figure this out. And what does it end up with? Company A, the first company that had been replaced, or Company B, the new company, says, well, they have the worst spam filter. They just, return all these results that are completely meaningless. Company A, the company that was displaced, their crawler sucks. They can't even find, they couldn't find it with their eye, if it were right in front of them. So we need transparency about data accuracy, data and repeatable methodologies, and actually what we've done in order to get the results that we've gotten. And if you think this is important for business, it's really important for things like cancer research, because you have to think about things like peer review and the ability to replicate scientific experiments. This is very, very hard with big data. You need to rethink informed consent. Any of you who saw you had to not be breathing to not see the whole Facebook contagion experiment several months ago. This is not a world that we live in anymore, in which you can, it's not enough to read the fine print and the terms of service that nobody reads anyway. So nobody reads terms of service. We need to find a way, if we're actually doing more than A/B testing, but we're doing some kind of changes to feeds or some kind of behavior that's going to essentially use our audience as research subjects, we need to really rethink this. And I know that there's been a huge amount of controversy about this, but I think it's really important to think about it because, at the end of the day, we're also subject to this kind of stuff as well. The next thing is that IoT is going to accelerate these issues. I mean, when you think about the fact that, you could have a refrigerator that has some kind of communication in it, and the communication is enabled by Wi-Fi, and it's actually tracking the number of times that you open and close your freezer, and then, your freezer breaks, and then you call the warranty department. The warranty department says, no, you're off warranty because you've opened and closed your freezer 1,500 times in the last 2 months. And you say, what? And then you realize you have a 3-year-old. This is not good. And so, again, part of the challenge is that, again, there are going to be these unintended consequences. And then finally, I want to say that with all of this, our trust in each other, in the technologies that we build, in the businesses that we do business with, is dynamic. It has to be continually earned. And one of the things that I've been working a lot on lately is putting together a code of digital ethics and social ethics that, together with the Big Boulder Initiative and a bunch of academics. And, they're really doing a lot of deep thinking about what that means. And so I wanted to just throw this all out to you to think about, to sort of, chew over, talk about over a beer with your friends as you do what you do. And thank you for your time. Happy to chat if any of you are around, and have some beer. Thanks.